Good evening. It is now 6:30 p.m. on Monday, March 15th, 2021, and I now call the Winton Woods City School District Regular Board of Education meeting to order. During this meeting, we ask that all attendees wear masks at all time unless speaking. With that said, our first item on the agenda is 1.02. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is item 1.03, which is the roll call. Mr. Seymour, will you please call the roll?
Dr. Johnson?
Present.
Mr. McGowan?
Present.
Mr. Birdie?
Present.
Dr. Cupoletti?
Present.
Mrs. Ruggles?
Present. The next item on the agenda, we are going to forego that. That is a recess because we do not have any district honors, recognitions, or gifts unless the board feels they need a break. All right, let's move on. The next item on the agenda is item 3.01, which is public comments. Do we have any public comments tonight? Seeing as none, we will move on to item number 4.01, which is comments from the Winton Woods Teachers Association. Do we have a representative tonight? Seeing as none, we will move on to item number 4.02, which is the Ohio Association of Public Schools Employees. Thank you, Ms. Shonda Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam President, Superintendent Smith, board members, and guests. Thank you for acknowledging OC tonight. We're very excited about the new building, the new beautiful buildings. And we just want to say we wish everyone a safe and happy let's go to the new buildings. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you for your presence at our meetings every week and every month, and all the treats that you give us. So thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is 5.01, which is the approval of the minutes. Board, unless you see any necessary changes to the minutes, a motion would be in order.
Madam President, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Thank you, Dr.
I'll second.
It has been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, will you please call the vote?
Dr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan?
Aye.
Mr. Birdie?
Aye.
Dr. Cupoletti?
Aye.
Mrs. Ruggles?
Aye. The vote passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is 6.01, which is the treasurer's recommendations. Mr. Seymour, you have the floor.
Yes, the treasurer's report and financials for the month ending in February for fiscal year 21. Year-to-date revenues are $38.8 million. Our month-to-date revenues were $11.2 million, which was mostly real estate tax advances on the second half real estate billing, and also state foundation of approximately $2 million. Our year-to-date expenditures in the general fund are at $33.7 million, and we are currently running under budget by about 6%, or $3.8 million. Our total funds available for all funds is $47.4 million. $21.8 million is currently in the general fund, $2.5 million in the building fund, and $15 million in classroom facilities. And that's basically a summary of the financials through February of 21.
Thank you, Mr. Seymour. Are there any questions for Mr. Seymour? With no objections being heard, let the financial statements for the month of February 2021 be submitted for audit. Back to you, Mr. Seymour, for 7.01 for the investment report.
Yes, our investments for the month of February were approximately $35 million. Investments, of which $16,302 was earned, $16,000 in the general fund for the month of February, and $2,332 for the building fund for the month of February. Most of the funds for classroom facilities are now at Star Ohio, which is paying 0.02%.
Thank you, Mr. Seymour. Board, a motion is in order.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the investment report as presented.
I'll second it.
It has been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, will you please call the vote?
Dr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. McGowens?
Aye.
Mr. Birdie?
Aye.
Dr. Cupoletti?
Aye.
Mrs. Ruggles?
Aye. The vote passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is 7.02, which is student fee schedule. Back to you, Mr. Seymour.
Yes, the student fee schedule that's being presented for you for approval tonight is for the 21-22 school year. And basically, it's the same items that have been on for the last several years since we no longer have student classroom fees. It's basically your advanced placement fees, which I ran by teaching and learning, and then the pay to participation fees for athletics. Unless you have any questions, those are basically all the fees that we have for the upcoming school year.
Thank you, Mr. Seymour. Board, a motion is in order.
Madam President, I'd like to make a motion to approve the student fees for 2021-2022 school year as presented.
I'll second.
It has been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, will you please call the vote?
Dr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. McGowens?
Aye.
Mr. Birdie?
Aye.
Dr. Cupoletti?
Aye.
Mrs. Ruggles?
Aye. The vote passes unanimously. The next items on the agenda are reports from the superintendents, 8.01 through 03. These are informational in order. These are informational. So board, if you have any questions, we will allow time for you to ask questions after Mr. Smith gives his informational reports. Mr. Smith, you have the floor.
Yes, Madam President and Board, as it relates to the report regarding buildings and buildings use or buildings classification or buildings as it relates to students and services, I am going to defray the report and move into feedback from the board regarding the main event that took place last Monday, which was the ribbon cutting. That was the main event that was occurring as far as the buildings are concerned.
Board, would you like to give some feedback to Mr.
The
Smith?
feedback, thank you, Ms. Rook, but the feedback will help us to determine how we have the next ribbon cutting ceremony for the South Campus. So anything would be appreciated.
Well, I'd like to say that I thought that the ceremony well represented our community. It was good to see how many different, it was very intentional in the invitation. So you can see where the school district touched different areas of the community, from Springfield Township to Green Hills to Forest Park to some of the community partners like Mercy Health. I think that's very important as we move forward in trying to continue to get support for our efforts and some of our goals. So, and it wasn't too long. I think that worked out very well. It wasn't too long, and it showcased our students. So that's my feedback so far.
Well, I could just add to that. I thought that it was a great turnout. And like Mrs. Ruggles said, it was very intentional. Those people who were on the platform, I think your administrative staff did a fantastic job with coordinating everything, the way it went off. I mean, I'm sure there were some hiccups. I didn't see any because, I mean, being on the outside looking in, everything looked like it ran very smoothly. The band was just fantastic. It was so nice to see them back, you know, together and playing. But you could tell that the event was very well planned, very well thought out. And so I think that your team, your executive team, your administrators did a wonderful job putting it together, and having the participation from all the different venues and the different people, like the different flights. I just thought that was really creative. So I don't know, as far as that goes, I think that the only thing I can say is thank you to everyone who showed up and did their part, and thank you to your administrators who put it all together, because you could tell there was a lot of work went into that. So
Thank you, Doctor.
I also like seeing the band. When I was driving up, I saw the band
Little
playing
parade.
and doing a parade. That was really good, seeing them practice in the park. And, you know, when you come out and you're like, hey, you know, oh, the band is playing. So that was a nice touch.
Yeah, I'll echo that. It was very well done. I think everybody enjoyed it. I know that Mr. Snyder from Great Oaks was there, and he thoroughly enjoyed it too and thought it was a great event. So thank you to everybody involved.
When we initially talked to Ms. Ashbrook about the band getting together to play, she was hesitant because she assumed that they were just about done with band because of football season and whatever. And the kids were so excited to get together again because they didn't think they would have that moment or that opportunity. So that's why they all volunteered. And because it was after school time for them, you know, because that's their last bell. And they said they would love to do it, and they can't wait to do it for the next building. So it was very exciting. And it was also good to have representatives from the South Campus, because they now can anticipate what this event should look like and how it should feel for kids. The one thing, having a conversation with Mr. Denny, our plan is to do something a little different, and we're hoping that we can have the event outdoors, because they do have the space to accommodate everyone to do that. So we'll see.
I think you have when you were doing your presentation and how you had soft touches to the students, talking to Emma and things like that, showing the personal both side of our connection with students. And I thought it was funny. I don't know if you noticed it when you mentioned year-round school. I don't know if anybody else heard the students like, what are you
I saw the
talking?
band members go, huh?
they sucked all the air out of the room.
Yeah, like they sucked all the air out the room. That was funny.
Well, there
One
was
other
one,
thing
there
I
was
would
one
wanna-
student in particular, when we mentioned the cafeteria, no cafeteria, and his response was no food. I said, well, no, we have distributed dining. We'll have food. So
Yeah.
There'll be food.
just calm down. It's going to be okay. And
Yeah.
he whispered to me later, I'm a senior, so whatever.
The other thing I would like to mention is the building tours. I thought that, you know, we started off in groups, and then everybody kind of ended up breaking off from their group or whatever. But the fact that the building stayed open for people to continue to just kind of peruse, you know, the place even on their own without some explanations. And then I kind of ended up with a whole different group than what I started with. You know, oh, they're going on tours, so I kind of walked around with them.
Yeah.
And the farewell tours, I've heard from several of my daughter's friends and my son's friends who came to go to the fair. They're still doing them, and I think that that's really nice, because it gives the students who were part of that old building an opportunity to say goodbye, take some
Right.
pictures of their favorite classrooms or whatever. So
Yeah.
And the administration just of the high school just thought it was going to be very important to do so, because it took a lot. It took a lot to get us here, and it took a lot to keep those buildings in shape until we got here.
yes,
I'd like to also say, even though this is not part of the building report, the maintenance and custodial team, you know, the abundance of snow that we had over the past few weeks created, it was just havoc in that building, you know, with the flat roof and the tar running down the walls and whatever. And those guys came in and replaced all tiles and cleaned up everything, just to know that kids were going to come back on the 8th. And that was just a respectful thing, because their piece is, yeah, the buildings are old, but they don't have to look terrible. And so the students respected it, understood it, even though there were still buckets in the hallway of catching the water in the after snow. But we're in a safer, drier place now, so that's all good.
Yeah. I also saw a lot of social media traffic as it related to here we are, we're 1 week away, we're moving in the building of the excitement, and just seeing different community members talk about their experience with coming to the event, or, oh, I wish I could have come to the event. So there's definitely some excitement that's out in the community around these buildings, so.
To Mrs. Bray or Ms. Wilson, is there anything that you guys want to add as it relates to COVID-19, as it relates to staff or students? Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I don't have too much to add, but to reiterate that the schools will be adequately and appropriately social distance, especially for students in the classrooms. And we are definitely following all the protocols as regulated through the CDC and Hamilton County Public Health Department. So staff and students will continue to wear masks, will continue to follow protocol, and will continue to social distance in all areas of the buildings.
Pretty good.
And good evening. I would just add to that report that we have had over 427 staff members vaccinated, which is a wonderful thing. It's helped us a lot with the need to quarantine and send staff home, and it's helped a lot with coverage. So that's roughly 80% of our workforce, and that's not including people that may have done it through their private doctors or that fully intend to do it but just couldn't make it to one of the two opportunities that we had. So we're very encouraged, and in fact, since the first vaccination in February, we've had very few staff COVID issues. We've had a few, and our theory is that maybe they had it before they were vaccinated. But we really haven't had we haven't seen the same numbers that we were seeing earlier this year. So that's a real positive piece to it. Thank you.
All right, Board. That moves us into the next conversation as it relates to preparing for spring activities for seniors and in the high school. And having the conversation with the board at the last work session, one of the things that the high school proposed was having a sit-down gathering that met all of the social guidelines from the CDC, which would be better known as a prom. The board accepted the conversation, and it's going to actually take place, I believe, on April 22nd, but there was a condition put in when I met with the team that there had to be at least 15 to 20 days in between prom and graduation. In the event that there's any kind of outbreak or a problem, the 14-day quarantine would definitely take us into the graduation. And when you count the days, it's definitely more than enough days, because the graduation is not until May 24th, I believe, something like that, between those 2 days. The other thing is, since we already had a sizable deposit through the treasurer's office at the Cintas Center, the graduation will take place, and it will take place at the Cintas Center. The Cintas has agreed that it will be 8 tickets per family. But the good part about what's happening with Xavier, they are going to stream the graduation live. So I know that was a request from Mr. Birdie. Would they be able to do that, and creating this remote kind of opportunity for families? And because some families may still be apprehensive about coming. And since there will be 8 tickets per person, I've seen it where it was 20 people coming for one kid. So This gives them an opportunity to come to the graduation, view it live from Xavier. And I'm sure other school districts are going to do the same thing, but once we made the request, it was automatic. So I wanted to let the board know that that part is already taken care of, and we're moving right along.
Okay. Mr. Smith, you can go on through the next two.
I'm sure you guys have reviewed from the work session the T1 report, but if there are any questions, comments, suggestions, or ideas, we can entertain those now.
Board, are there any questions?
Didn't have any.
Okay.
Okay.
Facilities update. Eventually, when we get to the part in the future about facilities update, you will only hear about facilities update of the South Campus because this one is already open, and we're going to give the little guys their just due to make sure that we kind of carry the torch into their facility as well. Mr. Denny?
Thanks, Mr. Smith, and good evening, Board.
Good evening.
Hope you're all doing well. It's great to see everybody in the new space and using it in a different way, so it's really great to see it. Update for this month is obviously the grand opening of the North Campus occurred, so that was a watershed moment in the process, so we were thrilled to see that. Also, the South Campus was actually finished right about the same time as the North Campus in terms of the construction of the building. Both sites still have a considerable amount of site work to do. That includes parking lots, it includes driveways, stormwater structures, things of that nature that will be going in. So as soon as we actually move out of the middle school, then we'll get a very short respite, about 2 weeks, and then the abatement process will start on the middle school. So you'll see, the farewell tours, of course, are going on, as well as a middle school auction's coming up. So there's an online public auction coming up. There'll be one for each building, but the middle school has to happen first, simply because of the time frame. So that'll be happening over the next couple weeks. And then later in May will be the auction for the high school. So I want to make sure I mention that because there's been a lot of community interest around it. Of course, it's a chance for the district to reclaim a small or perhaps not so small revenue stream, depending on the interest and the bidding. So it'll be on Bid FTA. There'll be a legal ad in the newspaper tomorrow. We'll make sure we push communication about it so people can be aware of that. In addition, the South Campus, as you know, is not scheduled to open until August. So we have that to look forward to as well, and some festivities around that, and moving out of some of our smaller buildings. So that's all part of the process. Also wanted to take the opportunity, Mr. Smith and I had a lot of conversations around this to, I guess, bring up some of the social media presence around a particular perception about this building that we currently find ourselves in. And I'll, of course, defer to Mr. Smith as well, but part of what we saw was we felt uncharacteristic. I think it was an accident of an unfortunate camera angle, to be quite blunt about it. As the board's aware, you've been in the building multiple times. We've taken multiple tours through the building. That day, the 8th, there were multiple tours. Didn't hear any feedback from anyone in person about anything other than the building looks great. In fact, the most common adjective I've heard over the last 6 to 12 months is the word collegiate. So I've not heard the term that we've heard used. I don't even like repeating it, but I think you know what I'm talking about. So part of what I think I want to make clear is, even as we sit in this room now, there are still punch list items happening. 1% of a building, which is about what's left in terms of the work, is pretty substantial on a building of this size, a 245,000 square foot building. So I think it's important for people to understand the building is still in process. It's not completely done. It's pretty close. It's definitely functional. But there's a lot of finishing touches going on. I think one of the big things that you're going to see across the next 2 weeks or so, and possibly even after that, is graphics packages being applied. So I don't know if you noticed, even from the 8th to today, did anyone notice the wording on the stairs? You're going to start seeing things like that. That's part of the design. It's just, we wanted to get people in as soon as possible, and we feel like we're racing the clock in this process because we're trying to move students and teachers' materials in right after spring break. So We've got packing week this week. I mean, the high school and the middle school have been doing a fantastic job getting packed. It's an enormous effort. It's a heavy lift because it's 50 years worth of things. So there's packing week, and then we've got moving week, and then we've got move-in week. And that's exciting because on the 29th, the teachers will return to unpack, and on the 30th, the kids come back. So all that to say, we had to fit the open house in, or the ribbon cutting, the building dedication, as well as,
Or the state of the schools.
yeah, and state of the schools. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Yeah, we have to,
With more
that's
than 100
efficiency,
people.
right? We're going to pancake those events as much as we can. But that was really a point where the building was ready to be seen, but it's not completely done. So I think that's part of the process. Is I think people need to understand what you're seeing when you're in the building is still a work in progress, especially when it comes to things like artwork, graphics, things of that nature. So the space in which we're talking about, actually you can see on screen now. Thank you so much, Rhonda, for putting that up. You can see, and this is a rendering from the architect, but the original design was to have those flags. The same presence of flags you see in the lobby are to fly up above in that space. So that's part of the process. You'll see that appear, we hope, over the next month, but we have to make sure we get everything hung correctly, and it's aircraft cable, and so there's a lot of work to do. But that's been part of the plan all along. You can see the amount of color that brings to the space, the vibrancy it brings, kind of this airy feeling. I think it really even opens the space up. I think we pointed out on the tours that you can see artwork can hang from the slats, that every third slat or every other slat there, the black colored slats are the ones that are actually magnetic, so you can hang student work. And then there's, of course, another piece of the graphics package is the Warrior logo. On the other end would be the academic logo, so you've got both facets of our student life represented there. And of course, you've got a lot of natural light coming into the space, and you can also see the addition of the wood slats there. They're not in there yet, but they're coming. So I just want people to understand it's not a blank canvas, but it's a canvas that's in process. It's a painting that's in process still. So that's just my input, Mr. Smith.
The other piece, we wanted the community we wanted to try to do this thing at the same time, and we made it as big as we could make it by sending out all the invitations. But we knew that we were going to have students return on the 8th, the first day, all students, and we wanted to have the grand opening in the same day. It was big, it was cavalier, it was huge. We did it, we pulled it off, but because we don't mind putting as many things out there as we can. I think in some case the community read, based on the picture that Mr. Denny mentioned about the Inquirer, they looked at it as, wait a minute, something's wrong here. Well, the something wrong is we're not complete. And again, as you see the renderings and how things are going to take shape, it just changes the whole building, because we knew that we were going to add some of the amenities, but we didn't know how long it would take to put the flags in and the slats. And we wanted to try to get this done before the other building, came alive. So I'm happy that we went and had a conversation with SHP. Our meeting was very short because it was basically people putting information out that really didn't do justice to the building. The other part that was really interesting for me is when people left that building on Monday the 8th, there were nothing but accolades about it. And I think sometimes the media can create a storm for you to make you think something is not really there. And again, when people left, they were happy. And then after the media burst, they were questioning. And so here's our answer. One thing that we are really good at Wentwood City Schools is when there's a question or a wonder, then we come back with, here's the answer to your wonder. And we don't take a lot of time doing it, because if the strategies are already in place, then we move to make sure that the community understand the strategies are there for the well-being of everybody here. So you have the renderings in front of you. You have the one that Mr. Denny has, and another version of it where you have the artwork there. And I think it really captures the essence of what this building really is going to become for all of the students. Questions?
Well, I will say that, in looking at this and in looking at the picture that's up there, this should be no surprise to us because we knew, what was there, over 400, 500 meetings with SHP, the community, the students, and broad engagement on what it is that we want. I mean, I use the example, if you put a picture, if some people look at it and say, oh, you look like Whitney Houston, until they put a picture up next to me. And they say, no, that's not Whitney Houston. But,
Wait, they were saying you?
exactly.
Okay.
I'm not
I mean,
even
I'm just
gonna-
trying to check.
Hey,
I'm,
Denzel.
okay.
Because when they put that
Yes,
picture next to
Denzel.
me and Denzel, they're like, they call Denzel Anthony, so it's all good.
Right. But we don't apologize for great work. This is great
No.
work. There's a lot of good work that has gone into this, and, like, you've said, and Mr. Smith has said, and from what I've heard from people who have actually been in the buildings, they did not have that opinion, and we don't apologize for great work, and I can't wait until we finish some of the touches that we still have to do, and then we start to see the students work up in some of those blank areas. So thank you for, coming and sharing this, but we know we're doing good work, so thank you all.
And one thing I would just like to say, it's always easy to criticize something if you haven't put your hand to the plow to do any other work.
Her mama
It's
said
easy to criticize, it's so much harder to make a suggestion and actually
Thank God for
start
her.
doing the work. But the other thing, the last thought that comes to my mind when people make negative comments about something that they don't understand, the building was built with project-based learning in mind. They don't understand project-based learning.
Very
So
good
when you
point,
look
Val.
at it, it doesn't look like what the
Traditional
old
school.
traditional building looked like. The other thing is that the mind can only see, the eye can only see what the mind can comprehend. So if your mind is closed to a new way of thinking, then you're not going to see, I don't care how many different renderings, pictures, if your mind is closed to that way of thinking, it really won't matter. So I think that the work that is done here, as it's already been stated, hundreds of meetings went forth before the building was built, while the building was being built, the whole process. And the community was sought out for, input. But what the district has done in this instant was an answer to many, many, many prayers over, a number of years. So it's been a long time coming. I know that the people that I've talked to are happy about it. And we can't wait till the kids get in here and start learning, in this space. So,
Absolutely.
Well, a good friend sent me a message. It was from Barack.
that's what the mind can only die on.
We go back and forth and have a lot of conversations. I won't say who. It's maybe not that Barack, but I know a Barack. Thank you, Mr. Birdie.
sorry.
You're killing my storm here, sir.
That's what I'm here for.
But
Here all night.
But I received this little note, and it's anonymous, and it was really cool. So I sent some pictures of it to board members, and it really depicts what we really are about. And it's really from Jean Piaget, who was a Swiss psychologist and worked with kids who were very disabled and struggled. But it says the principal goal of education in the school should be creating men and women who are capable of doing new things, not simply repeating what other generations have done. That's what this building is about. So,
I agree.
And
from
just
my
real-
friend, my other friend, Barack Johnson.
And just real quickly, I mean, everybody that I talked to that was actually in the building.
Good point.
Was
In the
thrilled.
building.
That was actually in the building was thrilled about the way the building looked. They thought it was beautiful. And to Dr. Johnson's point, I mean, this is a building built and designed by students, teachers, community members, administration. There was a lot of input into what this building would look like. The picture from the Enquirer, the angle was probably unfortunate, but at the end of the day, that doesn't matter what that picture looks like. The reality is, this is a beautiful building built to educate our children. And if you have a negative impact or a negative view of what this building is based on one picture in the Enquirer, I'm sorry, but you're small-minded
Yes.
as to what you're thinking. So I don't know what else to say, and I'm not going to apologize for that. You are. So call me, find me, email me if you want to talk about it. I'll be happy to do it.
Okay. Again, my thought was the eye can only see what the mind can comprehend.
Yeah.
That's it.
Her
That's what,
mama said
that, shut the door, that's it.
Yeah, find him, call him. This is our friend Jeff Johnson. You can locate him on the internet. Right.
Okay, Mr. Smith, does that conclude the facilities report?
Yes, that
or-
is the end. The next
Thank you
one
so
is
much.
the
Thank
personnel
you,
schedule.
Mr. Denny.
Thank you, Mr. D.
The next, yeah.
recommendations to approve the personnel schedules as presented. Schedule A, resignations. Schedule B, personal employment. Schedule D, personal employment for uncertificated. And Schedule E, leaves.
Okay, board, a motion is in order to approve schedules A, C, D, and E.
Madam President, I'd like to make a motion to approve the personnel schedules as presented.
I'll second it.
It has been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, will you please call that vote?
Dr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan?
Aye.
Mr. Birdie?
Aye.
Dr. Cupoletti?
Looks like we lost him at least on the
Oh,
screen there.
did we lose him?
We got him. He said aye.
Thank you. Mrs. Ruggles?
Aye. The vote passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is 9.02. Mr. Smith, you have the floor.
Ms. Wilson is going to give some of the overviews of the Interdistrict Open Enrollment Policy 5113. Before she starts, there was, again, information circulating about what open enrollment kids were, what they do, how we get them. And I can tell you that there's a very, very close screening about open enrolled kids. One of the things that I can say, and this is the board before me and the superintendent before me, to have the vision to have an open enrollment process in the district. Because I think one of the things that we found out more so than anything else is some of our children are very transient. They can't control where they live. That's up to parents to make those decisions. But we do afford them the opportunity to still attend our school. If we say we have this rare opportunity called PBL and you just can't get it anywhere, then having our children be able to still attend school no matter where they live in the greater Cincinnati area is really to our advantage. So that's where the open enrollment policy actually makes a lot of sense for us to continue with it. Ms. Wilson?
So this policy before you is not a new policy. It's simply revised and updated to reflect just the new dates. But just to review it, it's based off of Ohio Revised Code. All districts are required to have a policy. Some districts don't allow it, some do, but you have to have a policy. And if you have a policy, there's certain things that the Ohio Revised Code requires us to put in it. So much of what you'll see is required, and the language is kind of awkward because we don't really talk the way it reads, but it's taken straight from the statute. So basically, just to walk you through it real quickly, there is a student fee provision. So students who are economically disadvantaged, our open enrollment policy has to remove barriers for them. That's the first piece. Districts are allowed to have restrictions on their open enrollment policies. You don't have to accept everyone, but in general, you can't cherry pick kids from other districts. So what you have to do is you have to accept students unless they have been suspended or expelled for 10 consecutive days or more during the semester preceding their application, or if they've been convicted or ruled delinquent for committing any of the crimes that are listed in our policy. So anyone that says that all of the open enrolled kids are criminals or terrible people, that is inaccurate. In fact, in order to be eligible, you would have to be in good standing from your sending district and a non-criminal in order to come. So capacity, the statute says that districts should adopt guidelines around capacity. Ours says that we will take you unless we have to hire. So we're not going to incur costs to our taxpayers
Correct.
in order to accept students. However, we will accept you if we have room. And so we have a process where principals and different administrators in the district, we get together in the early spring, and we look at class size and our students that are applying, and we determine whether or not we have the capacity. And if not, that's the reason for not accepting a student could be capacity. We do give priority to, and this is the awkward language, we don't speak like this, but this is the statutory language, but we have to give priority to our native students, and that simply means residents, people that live in our district. So they have, they get the seats first, and from there, we can fill them in with students from other districts. We're not allowed to let open enrolled kids displace taxpayers' kids of the districts. Let's see, we are required to spell out our timeline, so you'll see that in our policy. It's got some concrete timelines for when parents will be notified, when decisions would be made, and when applications are due. So please look those over. There are some exceptions to the deadline that we delineate, and those are for kids that move out of the district during the school year. So if you start the year with us and your parents move, or for some reason you have to leave the district, we don't require students to have to leave if they want to stay. We allow them to remain as open enrolled students. Transportation, this is another protection for taxpayers. If students want to come to Winton Woods, they're more than welcome to come if we have the capacity. However, we do not incur transportation costs in order to bring them. So they have to find their own transportation here. And that's because it could become very overwhelming to a system to have to go across town to get a student. So we rely on the parents to figure that out on their own. There's a special education provision. We do not discriminate, so we could never say, we don't take special ed students. We have to take all students regardless of their race, gender, and ability, and religious, all of the protections of the Equal Protection Clause. So we specifically spell that out in our policy. We don't discriminate. We have a unique provision in ours that speaks to the Great Oaks. We try to avoid having students just sort of use open enrollment as a means to just circumvent our school, never setting foot in this district and going straight to the Oaks, or just sort of using us as a pass-through. So we do have a provision in our policy.
The Oaks doesn't want that either.
Let's see.
The Oaks doesn't
There's-
want students doing that either.
I know, yeah.
There's a high school athletic provision, and this is consistent with the Ohio High School Athletic Association. So there are all kinds of rules governing eligibility. So if you're an open enrolled student and you're an athlete elsewhere, we have to follow the Ohio High School Athletic Association's guidelines around that. So that prevents that illegal recruiting of kids from other districts.
All recruiting is illegal, so it prohibits recruiting.
Okay, yes, you're
Okay.
right, okay. And then we specify our application process and what is required to open enroll. So we do that, and a lot of parents sometimes I shouldn't say a lot, but some parents get a little frustrated with us because our registrar can be a strict stickler about the requirements. But the reason, if you ever hear complaints, and you have to explain this to community members or parents, the reason we are so demanding is because in order to request payment from other districts for their students, sometimes they'll say, well, how do we know that they really live in our district? So if we haven't done our homework and dotted our I's and crossed our T's, we could be stuck thinking someone lives, say, in a neighboring district, when in fact, we don't really know where they live.
And I'm happy, Ms. Wilson, that you really clarified that, simply because earlier when you mentioned taxpayers' kids from this community, well, the taxes, the dollars actually travel with those kids from that community. So if there are students that are open enrolled to us from another school district, those dollars flow with that kid to our community as well. So it's not where the taxpayers of the district of Winton Woods absorb all of the burden and responsibility for educating the kid. The money comes with that student. So I wanted to just clarify that so people know that it's not just a one-way street.
Right. Yeah. And we are very diligent in making sure that we know exactly where kids are coming from so that we can make sure we get the funding for them. And then the statute requires the Board of Education to review this policy every year, and then the superintendent has to certify this policy every year with the Ohio Department of Education, and Mr. Smith has done that recently. Racial balance, this is not our language. It's kind of another one of those awkward phrases that Ohio Revised Code requires, but this provision is required, so you're allowed to use open enrollment if you have schools that are disproportionately one race or the other. You can use open enrollment as a means to balance out the racial demographics of the building. And again, similar to the special ed provision, our policy is non-discriminatory. So all of those protected classes, protected by the Constitution, we also respect. So do you have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Mr. Smith, is there anything you want to add to that before we get the motion on the floor?
No, but I know that Mr. Birdie and I have had conversations as it relates to pass-through from the Oaks, and I'm sure he would like to kind of give us the Oaks background on it since he sits on their board.
No, I think Mrs. Wilson said the same thing that the Oaks are thinking too, that they were concerned about people trying to pass through one district to get to the Oaks and not really being in that district. So I think their open enrollment policy prohibits that as well, so.
So we are aligned.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we're aligned.
Yes.
Thank you. Board, a motion is in order.
Madam President, I'll make a motion to approve policy PO 5113, interdistrict open enrollment as presented.
I'll second.
It has been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, will you please call the vote?
Dr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan? Mr. Birdie?
Aye.
Dr. Cupoletti? Mrs. Ruggles?
Aye. The vote passes unanimously, and we will move on to 9.03, which is the bid approval. Mr. Smith, you have the floor.
Yes, Madam President. While Mr. Denny is moving up to the podium, I'd just like to add that once we completed the buildings here, we could see that we could have almost had issues with Title IX by not approving or having appropriate locker space for girls. And so we have been very, very diligent, and we don't want to be cited for anything, so we did it expeditiously, where we went out to get bid packages for the athletic complex. Some of those locker rooms and areas are going to be converted for space for young ladies. So we were able to get the bid package through SHP. They won the bid, and you could see the grand total is $177,951, which is absolutely a steal, especially when you're talking about changing restrooms and converting them to spaces that actually fit our female population. Mr. Denny?
Thank you, Mr. Smith, and good evening again, Board. Mr. Smith summed up the purpose behind the bid. I would also add that in an effort to make the bid as attractive as possible to contractors and therefore drive the cost of the bid down, we did combo it with another project, which is the addition of a freezer at the intermediate school. That's been planned for some time. It's purchased through food service dollars. It's not an impact on the general fund. And as you know, the expectation in Ohio, as well as many other states, and our district's no exception, is that the food service fund operate independently and not in the red, and it's independent of the general fund. And we're very fortunate. We've had very strong management, and that fund continues to be in a good financial position. So what you have before you, Board, would be a recommendation letter from the architectural design firm SHP. It is recommending to you for your consideration the firm Kramer and Feldman Incorporated, that's KFI. Part of the reason a letter comes from the architect is that they've worked with this firm before. They've done design work, and this firm's delivered on that design in the past, and it's been successful. So they're basically signing off on, yes, they could support the selection of this firm without fear of any issues in completing the work. It is a lot of lockers. It's restroom modifications, as Mr. Smith said, and it's also a freezer at the intermediate that will help us with food preparation, especially in the summer when that becomes our main commissary, but also across the school year for the same purpose. The total combo bid, including all alternates, was $177,951. The initial budget estimate, this was also published in the paper because that's required under Ohio law, was $305,000. So as Mr. Smith said, we're getting this for a steal. And part of it is not even a general fund impact. So it's a really good position to be in as a school district.
Yes, sir. One point of order. The originator, Ms. McKenzie, the letter needs to just be modified slightly because it has a word missing. All right, it says "whoa" instead of "to." After, in between the separate and of.
I'll make sure I get it corrected.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
No problem.
I didn't know what a "whoa" bid was, but I thought it was a good deal, since it was almost half price.
It was like, whoa.
Yeah.
That must be it.
Very good,
Is that
Mr.
it?
D. Thank you. And
Thank
we
you.
hope that, Mr. Denny, you know what would really
Yes,
be
sir.
good at one of the future meetings? If you could bring some pictures of that facility, of what it looks like now and and then the modification after. I think it would let the board understand exactly how important it was to make the modifications.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
then they can speak the language to anybody in the community about why would you spend $177,000 when you already have done this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And
Very good.
We could definitely do some before and after photos.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I trust me, the before pictures are a little scary, so just be patient.
They always are. They always are. Thank you, Mr. Denny
Thank you.
and Mr. Smith. Board, a motion is in order.
I'll make a motion to approve the bids as presented.
I'll second.
Second.
It has been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, will you please call the vote?
Dr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan? Aye. Mr. Birdie?
Aye.
Dr. Chicoretti?
Aye.
Mrs. Ruggles?
Aye. The vote passes unanimously. Now we'll move on to 10.01, which are the legislative report. We have House Bill 67, which provides an assessment and graduation flexibility. In this bill, it waives the administration of the state-required American History end-of-course exam for this school year. It expands the window of spring assessments, and it moves the deadline of ODE reported data from school report card from September 15th through October 14th. And it also permits students to use final course grades in lieu of end-of-course exams through the school year 2024. There's also, we discussed this a little bit last week, House Bill 34, but given what Mr. Smith said a little bit about records transferring and making sure that, as students are transferring in between districts, that House Bill 34, again, it talks about the timely submission of records to help facilitate a seamless transition for students. And again, as we talked about students going from district to district, that is not students' responsibility. It's typically the parents' responsibilities, but what this bill does is it supports the transfer of school records, for students' records within 5 days. They also think that this would also help with increasing graduation, because sometimes students, when their records aren't transferred, they get a schedule where it might be a class that they've already taken, and so this helps facilitate moving students through to graduation faster. And also, sometimes teachers are overwhelmed because they're trying to figure out where students are, but having the records up front will help them identify where to place students and how to support them. House Bill 110 is the completion of the FAFSA to graduate. And that has a little bit of controversy behind it, but what it's asking is that all public and chartered non-public schools, students be required to complete the FAFSA before graduation. I know Dr. Johnson may know this, that sometimes students have different reasons for not filling out the FAFSA. Parents may not provide the information to the students so that they can complete it. So making sure that having that as a provision of graduation can be controversial, but overall, I do believe it is very important that we get in front of parents and students when they're at that age of when they're seniors, to help them understand the importance of completing that FAFSA on time and the amount of money that they could get early on in their financial aid packet. So that's House Bill.
Madam President,
yes.
if I may add, the one thing that I hope that parents understand, it's very important to fill it out with fidelity, because if you just go through it because the state says you have to complete it, you could be foregoing on some great opportunities and scholarship dollars. So, you know, the counselors and the administration in the high school have pushed very, very hard about doing it, but doing it right, and not just doing it to complete it, because you could be foregoing money that you could actually benefit from, and you didn't know that you had that opportunity. And I think that's the message that the state is trying to give us. There are some opportunities for young people that they're not taking advantage of, but don't just fill it out to fill it out. Do it like it means something, because people are very hesitant, especially, you know, after COVID-19, of sharing financial records. They're hesitant to give you all this information about who they are and what they do, because people may assume that you're doing it to take something from me as opposed to offering something for my child.
Yeah, I definitely support the measure, but I think that we, you know, before it becomes official, we need to make sure that there are some exceptions, and there are definitely some exceptions to completing it. But I definitely have seen so many students who show up to the first day of class and are just wondering how come they can't just go down to the bookstore and get their books. They haven't done the FAFSA. So
And you've been talking about it from a local perspective. Imagine young people who travel thousands of miles to go to a university and you're not complete.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I agree, we need to make sure that our students understand that they could be missing an opportunity.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
at the same time, if we have students that are not going to get the support from their parents to get the thing filled out, I'd hate to see them get penalized
Right.
in any way, shape, or form because of that.
Yeah.
So,
And our counselors have to
I know
tread
that's
very
not on us.
lightly in that conversation, because you're pushing that parent in a way, give me the information about your financial records, and the parents. So, but our counselors are so sophisticated. If you would actually watch them work and see how they communicate to parents, you would be very impressed, because they're doing it in a very delicate way. But if you push me so much about my financial records, it can turn out bad.
After going through FAFSA multiple times with my two youngest, is it possible for us to provide maybe some FAFSA training in the evenings for the parents, because it can be overwhelming?
That's what the counselors do
Yeah.
right now.
So we have
Yes.
time where the parents come in the
Yes.
evening and we help them fill it out?
Yes.
And, you know, the counselors are well-equipped to do it, but I do know that part of the financial aid, colleges receiving federal aid, they have to have so much community service. So they're more than willing, their financial aid departments, and I don't know about all of them, but I know some, will come out and host financial aid opportunities. And there's several things that I know that our counselors connect our students and our families to with completing that portion.
One thing I'd just like to add about the FAFSA, the reason it is so important and just being at the community college is that students at our school are not even eligible to sign up for scholarships.
Right.
Until they've done that.
Yep.
So there's other free money that they could get, but you can't even, you're not
Get
even
it
qualified to get that unless that FAFSA is filled out. So they might qualify for this scholarship, but then we dig a little deeper and there's no FAFSA, and they're like, oh, well, you can't give them any money. So it's important, from that standpoint, for parents to look at it a little differently. When they know if they're trying to go to school, to look at it a little differently and say, oh, well, I'm also not going to be eligible for this other free money. Scholarship is free money, so if I don't fill out this paperwork. So just another reason to encourage them to do it.
Good point. And then the last one is House Bill 100, deals with the Academic Distress Commission. We've talked a lot about that at the Urban Network, the OSBA Urban Network, and that's a system that's in place where this commission comes in and intervenes with struggling school districts, and that in itself has some of its own issues. But this proposal, it proposes to dissolve the existing Academic Distress Commission and repeal the law on creating new commissions. So with COVID and the impact on students and, the assessments that's going to have to happen to see where our students are, there's having an Academic Distress Commission. I think education is distressed at this point.
Right.
So that's all that I have for the legislative
Ms.
report.
Robles, The
Yes.
other thing about the Academic Distress Commission, every time it's intervened, the system is worse.
Yes.
The system has proved to be worse when they intervened, not sometimes every single time.
Yeah, there's a lot of work that was going in to addressing the purpose and evaluating the effectiveness of the commission. So I'm glad to see that there's some efforts behind removing this possible barrier. That's all that I have for the legislative report. We can move on to 10.02, which is the Great Oaks Career and Technical Center report. Mr. Birdie, you have the floor.
For the Great Oaks report, we had our meeting last Wednesday, March 10th. And prior to the normal time where we meet, we have committee meeting and then we have the regular board meeting. We had a unity and diversity meeting where we had Dr. Rodney Coates from Miami University and Dr. John Ernst from Thomas More come in and do a presentation on implicit bias for the board members. And I was pleasantly surprised with the number of board members that actually attended this meeting, and there was a lot of good discussion that came from it. So hopefully we'll be moving forward as a board at Great Oaks to find ways to better the unity and diversity measures that they're looking at. So, and then we had three students from Winton Woods who were acknowledged in the Spotlight on Students report. Shauna Allen, LaKion Harris, and Shaylin Irby Martinez. They all received the Scarlet Citizenship Award. And then they also had a ribbon cutting ceremony that week at Scarlet Oaks for a child care center that was just opening up that's going to be run by Learning Grove, that's going to serve the community or students or staff that actually work at the
Excellent.
location. So, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Birdie. Let's move on to 11.01, which is the Board of Education recommendations. Board, are there any motions or recommendations at this time?
Okay, yeah, here. I'd like to make a motion to change the location of the future board meetings.
That will be here?
That will be here.
Yep. Okay. Board, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Has been motioned and seconded. Mr. Seymour, will you please call the vote?
Dr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan?
Aye.
Mr. Birdie?
Aye.
Dr. Capoletti?
I,
Mrs. Ruggles?
Aye. The motion passes. We will move on to 12.01, which is comments from the Board of Education and the Superintendent and Treasurer. Dr. Cupoletti, we will start with you.
well, I'd just like to congratulate everyone who was involved in these last few years in accomplishing a magnificent job of putting together 2 new school buildings. I am enthusiastic for each of the teachers as they prepare to move in. I'm sure the community is also excited about having the teachers move in, and I'm sure the students are also happy. But, you know, it's just such an amazing thing that you accomplished, and thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Cupoletti. Dr. Johnson.
Yes, I just want to make a statement with respect to the district returning to full-time learning on Monday, March the 8th, and how the transition to make that happen with all the adjustments took a lot. It was a lot of work for a lot of people to make that happen. I've often made this statement with respect to this board approving three different types of learning and giving the administration and superintendent the flexibility to pivot where they needed to pivot to make the decision based on what the CDC was saying. But having everybody back into the buildings, there were some families that did opt out. You know, they still wanted to stay in online learning. But we just appreciate the patience and understanding from the people within the district as we navigated through all of those different learning formats. So just to say that, also to, again, thank everybody for participation in the grand opening of this North Campus. The building tours, all of that takes some orchestration and takes time, and people are, you know, putting out their time to do that, and we appreciate that. Also, coming up on Wednesday, March the 7th is, and it's already started, but I think there's another one coming up on Wednesday, is the credit check, the Warriors credit check. If you don't know how many credits you need to graduate, you need to check that out. Talk to your counselor. If you're a parent and you didn't get that email or letter or whatever in the mail, you need to call the counselor. You need to check and see how many credits your student has. And this is something that you need to check every year. It's not something you want to wait and check until they're a senior. You want to check it when they're in the 9th grade. Did they get all their credits? If they didn't, do they need to go to summer school? So it's just a process, but that's coming up. I think I've seen on the calendar that there was one coming up on Wednesday for credit checks. So see, not your credit, you know, how much money you can spend, but how many credits you have for you to graduate. Also, their report cards are coming out this Friday. So, you know, just to kind of be aware of that. And then after that, we're on spring break. And so I want everybody to have a safe spring break. Enjoy yourself. Do something fun, even if it is within the confines of the state of Ohio, and be safe. That's it.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Mr. Birdie.
Just thank you to everybody that's involved in educating our children and taking care of them when they're in the buildings, whether they're picking them up in a school bus and bringing them to our buildings. Everything that we do is important and impacts our students on a daily basis, so thank you to everybody that does that. I'll reiterate something I said earlier. Anybody that's making a decision on these buildings based on a picture from the Enquirer, please don't do it. find a way to come see the buildings. When we do the ribbon cutting ceremony at the South Campus, make sure you show up and see it, because I can tell you there is nobody that was inside the building that has a negative opinion of what was in the building. I'll also say that I did run into somebody who went to school with my dad, who came up and introduced themselves to me, so you never know who you'll meet in one of these buildings or ribbon cutting ceremonies, so thank you.
Wow.
Mr. Purdy. Mr. McGowan.
A couple of things. One of my dad's favorite sayings was, your perception is your reality. And if, in fact, there are people out there that are watching us tonight, and their perception is that what we talked about, that it looks like whatever, then, make sure they contact us, And I think a lot of it comes down to what Mr. Smith said and what Mr. Denny said, is that it's not completed. So until it's completed, let's hold back your ideas about, how it looks or whatever. But I don't want to minimize that. If some people feel that way, we need to address it and, talk to us, call us or whatever to make sure we change that perception. And the second thing is the levy. I want to always make sure we kind of talk about that we do meet every Thursday at 4:30, Inspiration Baptist Church, always looking for volunteers and help. So if anybody can come up on Thursdays at 4:30, we would appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. McGowan. Mr. Seymour.
No, thank you, Beth.
Mr. Smith.
Yes, one correction. Graduation is May 20th. I think I said May 22nd, and any senior watching, they're probably like totally upset because I gave them 2 more days of something.
How can he not?
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. In closing, I want to say that I am looking forward to our meeting, that's with Mr. McGowan and Mr. Smith tomorrow with Springfield Township, so we can continue our conversation. I'm not going to repeat all the wonderful things. I just echo everything that everybody has said, and especially with Mr. McGowan. Go see him if you have issues. But let's, as far as the retreat board, we talked about having a board retreat. We're going to move that out to the summer. I had a meeting. I sit on the Great Parks Advisory Board, and we had 3 meetings, and that was really important to understand some of the academic support services that they provide to school districts. And so just encouraging us to take advantage of those things. They also offer some remote opportunities, learning opportunities for students. Also, board members, there is the OSBA Leadership Institute that is April 23rd through the 24th. It is a virtual training, so if you're interested in attending that, please reach out to Mr. Seymour so he can help get you registered. And also, Mr. Smith, if you could, I'll share the information with you. I usually send it to Mr. Beisho and Mr. Martin. The OSBA Black Caucus Scholarship deadline is coming up, which is April 21st, which is all the more reason why you need to get your FAFSA done so that you can be eligible for that scholarship. I've sat on the scholarship committee, and it's very interesting to see the stories and the essays that the students write. And I have to say, Winton Woods students do an excellent job. Although I don't get a chance to read theirs, but sometimes there's a committee member that may have a Winton Woods student, and they'll say, wow, this was really, really good. So thank you to the counselors for helping the students get themselves prepared for that competition. And that's all that I have, and with no other comments for the board and the superintendent, we can move on to 13.01, which is a motion to go into executive session. I am not aware of a need to go into executive session, so we'll move on to 14.01, which is adjournment. So if there's nothing else, I'd like to thank our Waycross media partners and Ms. Hobbs for continuing to support our efforts to remain remote. Hopefully, this may be the last time that we do it. And Mr. Smith?
Did you get comments from Dr. Cooper?
Oh, yeah, he was the first one.
I
He
thought you
was
had
so
more
quick.
to say, because I could barely hear him.
Oh, yes, I did. So if there's nothing else that we need to discuss, I will call the Winton Woods Board of Education regular meeting on Monday, March 15th, 2021, adjourned. Thank you and good night.